just felt so so human and alive again for the first time in years.
I was interested in the whole aspect of, as Leary says, consciousness expansion and spiritual awareness, a heightened form of living, I guess.
Did you achieve that?
Yes, definitely.
I've known 2 people who've killed themselves under LSD. You're right out of control of your own, control.
Are there acid parties going on in this city right now? Yes. Yes. At this very second. I mean, if I said, let's go to an acid party, you could take me to one. I could, but I won't.
I'm 18 years old. I've taken LSD about 10 times.
And do you intend to take it again?
Perhaps.
The core of a living human brain cell behaving normally, accepting or rejecting, remembering or forgetting faint impulses reaching it. Then LSD is introduced. In a moment, the faint tendrils will begin to withdraw, perhaps symbolizing the lifting of inhibitions ingrained by the habits of a lifetime. LSD. During the past 20 years, its effects have been widely researched, but it remains a mystery drug. To the despair of many doctors, today turning on or taking a trip, using LSD more or less for kicks, is fashionable. Dr. Harold Abramson of New York. He has published 45 research papers on lysergic acid.
LSD has found its greatest dangers, I believe, in the hands of those who are not qualified to use it, namely those who administer it to themselves. When properly qualified physicians use it, I do not consider it a drug that's any more dangerous than any other drug used in medicine, because medical men have their own rules for what is considered good practice in medicine, whereas the people who sell LSD to college students don't have similar cultural restraints, which I think we physicians have.
What are these cultural restraints?
That a doctor is responsible for what he prescribes.
But who is in charge of the person's consciousness, himself or his doctor?
I don't think they should be free to choose from a medical point of view, because LSD is a new drug. I think the dangers of using LSD and the confusion that comes to people under LSD and the pseudo-hallucination and the paranoid effects, the depersonalization, the psychotic processing makes it dangerous. If it's taken by the Freedom Group to expand consciousness, many of them end up in the hospital, and suicides have been reported. It did not solve their problems. It really didn't.
But does not heightened self-awareness constitute the ordinary means to human progress as such?
It may. It isn't necessarily so.
You don't need to know to know?
You have to be able to use what you know.
Which is to say what?
Knowledge can be self-destructive, too.
But isn't it the person's responsibility to handle the knowledge at his disposal? It's not surely left in the hands of doctors.
Well, I don't think it should be left in the hands of doctors alone, and it isn't, because the doctors are also regulated by governmental rules. I just believe that when there are dangerous drugs that produce psychoses around, whether it's LSD or MLD or any of the others, that the use of drugs that produce psychoses should be regulated by law.
My question is, who's going to be consulted on making the law? Will it be the scientists? Will it be the artists? Will it be the hippie kids? Or will the law be made by somebody who really doesn't know what the chemical's all about?
Larry Schiller of Los Angeles, the freelance photographer who spent 4 months photographing the recent Life magazine cover story on LSD.
1 million doses on the black market?
Million's kind of calmed down, because I'd say it's more like 15 or 20 million. One of the big pushers in this country called me after seeing the story, and he's not really a pusher. He calls himself a seller, a dealer.
Yeah.
And he said, Jesus, Larry, he says, I told you I sell $750,000 alone. And he says, it's more like 15 or 20 million. He said, you're going to put me out of business. We can take any, group of these pictures. Let's talk what nobody believes is taking place, and this is the black market in this country. Here's a photograph of a small little tablet on the edge of a finger. Well, that's 500 micrograms. That's right, this little thing up here, that's the new way it's being distributed in this country. That's enough to give a 15-year-old girl hell. There's been a whole area of this country that is now taking LSD, the high school and college students. There's a university in this country that you can't go to, that LSD isn't the password to many a party.
What's the matter? Come back. Come back.
Scares the hell out of me.
What?
All of this.
It's only because you want it to.
I don't want it to.
If you do, you wouldn't let it scare you.
Only want to get out. Just like wish that had never happened.
All that Grox is gone. Look behind you. Did you see it?
enough LSD in an eyedropper is enough for 5,000 dosages. On the wholesale market in England, that may sell for $400. Bringing it into this country, it may sell for $1,500. By the time you get it to a distributor, it sells for $5,000. By the time you get it out on the black market, it's $25,000. I mean, it's colorless, it's odorless, as you undoubtedly know. You can take enough for 300,000 dosages, and I find my handkerchief here and soak it into my handkerchief, as I saw somebody do, transport it across from one country to another, and then just wash his handkerchief out and take the liquid from his handkerchief and spread it on chewing gum. And he just sells it on chewing gum. He's got a whole supply of chewing gum. So enforcement of LSD is a major problem.
You shouldn't go to your house.
That's right.
We are living in, and many of us in this room are part of, an epidemic. An epidemic with as yet unknown causes, and I think as yet unknown effects. Physicians, patients, physicians themselves, experimenters are no longer the major using group. Nowadays, what do you think, 1%, 2% of the use of the drug is licit and experimental in a medical setting or university setting? Was it 99% or 99.9% where we find the use occurring on the streets and in the parlors, on the beaches, and many become less and less interested in what you and I might call the problems or affairs of the real world outside and emphasize for themselves the real world inside. There are all kinds of issues which arise at this point, one of which is what happens if at what is the critical level in a given society before we begin to have troubles in keeping the plows and machines going? The people who are inner-oriented will frequently say, the hell with the plows and the machines are what got us here in the first place. They may be right. Nevertheless, what will happen to the society remains a problem.
Richard Blum at a California college forum on LSD. And in the audience, an expert not invited to speak. The man in the middle with glasses, Richard Alpert, one of the two Americans most often blamed or praised for the psychedelic revolution.
My reaction to being the two nights at Foothill College were that I've had, as I say, LSD over 300 times, and by the end of those 2 nights, it was like going to 2 horror movies. I was so scared I didn't know if I'd ever be able to take LSD again. It really reminded me of 4 guys up there on the lecture platform, all of whom had had bad sessions and bad re-entries and had this terrible view of the whole world, you know, and all they could see were the problems and the fears for society, but none of the potential, none of the positive questions about what is man to do next and what opportunity might LSD hold. They're not even interested in that. They are so committed to the fact that this society is the way it is, and that's all you can expect. And that's what I call vested interest in the ongoing game. And if you have vested interest in the ongoing game, you are frightened by anything that might change it.
How did we get hung up this way? Because it's a social condition, you'd agree.
How did we get hung up this way? How did man get into this kind of cultural limits?
Yes, this incredible assumption that society is as it is and has always been this way.
Well,
because that makes no sense at all the moment you say it, and yet people behave as if that were true.
Well, it's just like, for example, I was at a lecture the other day of Buckminster Fuller, and who's doing your dome for the World's Fair, I think, up in Canada. And he said, look, we now know there is enough to go around, all right? In other words, if we could truly collaborate with our fellow man, there would be enough to go around for the world. Right? But none of us can break through our own models of the way the game goes enough to do the things necessary to bring about that realization. And it's only when there is enough that we can become back to we, both of us as subjects, and experience the unity when we actually collaborate about our resources. And man has come out of the jungle where there wasn't enough, and where he fought for it, and he's built a whole ethic around not having enough. And now, to be able to really shift that ethic is a very, and the whole motivational pattern connected with it is a very difficult thing for him to do.
I'm reminded of a slogan or two I saw some students carrying once. One said, all wars are civil wars because all men are brothers. And another one said, there is no they.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the components of the LSD experience. The understanding that there is no they. There's no other. It is all one. And it's really, what happens here is, there are a lot of experiments in psychology with figure ground. That is the relation of the background to what stands out. All right? Now, in our culture, we've been trained for individual differences to stand out. So you look at each person, immediately it is brighter, dumber, older, younger, richer, poorer, and we make all these dimensional distinctions, put them in categories, and treat them that way. And we get so that we only see others as separate from ourselves in the ways in which they're separate. And one of the dramatic characteristics of the psychedelic experience is being with another person and suddenly seeing the ways in which they are like you, not different from you, and experiencing the fact, well, yes, indeed, we are brothers in the true sense of that which is essence in you and which is essence in me is indeed one.
What's this do to the free enterprise market system?
Well, what it does, if I understand it right, is it moves the basic motivation from an achievement, competitive, to a collaborative kind of enterprise, which means that I'm not working in order to beat you out, but you and I are working in order to both make it. Now, at this point, I'm aware that you're a separate individual from me. We're separate, but there's something similar, all right? Now, at this point, there is this start to break down of the separation, the separation between us. For example, I might look down, and this is an external hallucination. I will see my body disappear, right? Or see those ways in which I am different become like learned things that I wear, like this sweater. For example, PhD, what does that mean? All right, it means I got a certain kind of education, acquired a certain degree for being more educated than 1/10 of 1% of the world's population, something like that, all right? And that assures me of something or other in society, all right? In fact, it's a garb I wear. If I had the gown and the cap, that would be the external symbol of that same thing, all right? Now, that gown is a psychological gown I wear, just like Richard Alpert is a gown I wear. It's an identity that I've taken on. I wasn't born Richard Alpert. I was just born as a human being. And then I learned this whole business of who I am and whether I'm good or bad or achieving or not. All that's learned along the way. And you see all those learned things separate. So you start to have this dissociative experience of where all that you become is awareness, is a point of awareness. That's all that's left. I remember the first time this happened to me, as professor went and middle class boy went and pilot went and all of my games were like going off in the distance, I got this terrible panic because indeed I was going to cease to exist. And I got the panic, which is the panic that precedes the psychological death, because indeed Richard Alpert was dying at that point. And the panic was, no, stop, I've got to hold on to something so I'll know who I am. And Timothy, the wise old Timothy, always says things like, trust your nervous system.
Dr. Timothy Leary, once a clinical psychologist and Harvard professor, now, by his own description, a visionary prophet. Others have called him the man most responsible for the North American crisis over LSD.
Dr. Leary, what are you up to here?
We teach the science and art of ecstasy. We teach people how to turn on or how to go out of their minds. By turn on, we mean tune in, to get beyond your routine ways of thinking and acting and experiencing. And we often say that we're teaching people how to use their head. The point is, in order to use your head, you have to go out of your mind. You have to go out of all of the static, symbolic ways in which you think, experience. Most of us, most of the time, see the world through a very small set of filters. You use perhaps 1/1,000,000th of the potential energy and wisdom that's inside your head. So then people say, no matter what they say about LSD, we always translate it into using your head. So if they say LSD is dangerous, they say, your consciousness is dangerous.
You're not saying LSD cannot be misused, but...
Well, of course, it's a form of energy, and it releases energy. And any form of energy which man has discovered can be used for ill or for good. It can be used to gain power, control over other people, or it can be used to help people develop and grow. When you take LSD, you don't go out and get involved in fights, or you don't go out and get involved in activity. It's an internal experience.
What about going out a window and getting involved with the sidewalk 12 floors under?
Well, the hundreds of thousands of people taking LSD, how many people have done that? The statistics show that taking LSD is no more dangerous than signing up for a 4-year course at Harvard College. A certain percentage of people who do either are going to get into trouble, but there's no scientific evidence that LSD causes any such...
Any distortion of the sort of root, say, suicide statistic, or the root Or mental hospital commitment.
Mental hospital commitment.
There's no evidence that LSD causes this, and there's evidence that it doesn't cause it, any more than you would expect by chance in a population of 1,000 people. But when you take LSD and your conscience expanded, the number of possibilities and the number of perspectives dramatically multiplies. And then you're in real ontological confusion. That's why we always have urged people, don't take LSD unless you're very well prepared, unless you're specifically prepared to go out of your mind. Don't take it unless you have someone that's very experienced with you to guide you through it. And don't take it unless you are ready to have your perspective on yourself and life dramatically change, because you're going to be a different person, and you should be ready to face this possibility.
Using energy in a way to take people beyond where they are at. This may be white magic. White magic is where you use energy to take people beyond where they are, the direction they want to go, and you try to tell them that.
Timothy Leary's rented estate is almost as fantastic by day as it is by night. 3,000 acres, complete with man-made lakes, in the rolling woodlands of upstate New York.
The estate was built by a wealthy madman 7 years ago, and it's been the home, I guess, for people who want to go out of their minds ever since. It is mad in the sense that someone has to have some sort of magical vision to build walls and meditation houses and Bavarian ski lodges. That's what we have around here. It's an incredibly magical place. Every few hundred yards has a little shrine of some sort.
Some of the guests have been asked to play the role of cooks, cameramen, candlelighters. I'm going to keep shifting everything we do this weekend. Actually, there's some possibility that I'm just a visitor here for the weekend, reading a script that was handed to me by the people who run this place. So you're never going to be sure exactly who's who and who's supposed to do what. Because any moment you're going to be asked to run a psychedelic session, or to cook a meal, or to run a television camera, or to weed the garden.
In his natural habitat, the prophet preaches. Timothy Leary in a Saturday morning session of words and silences.
The first several years that we were engaged in psychedelic research, we deliberately tried not to impose any kind of session
programs or any models or metaphors or theories on the psychical experience. During the first few years of our research, we concentrated on making the experience pleasant and educational and safe. The session tonight we're going to use as the model, a voyage into your own body. The human brain receives several billion signals a minute. Your brain is being flooded with millions of coded messages from all parts of your body every second. Most of us, most of the time, are completely blocked from awareness of the information which is flooding into our nervous system. Often, people during LSD sessions get trapped where their consciousness floats into one of these areas of the nervous system, to be lost there because you don't recognize it, and to suffer tremendous anguish or experience incredible new ecstasies as you whirl through this center, to slowly dissolve and go back down the history of your own nervous system and experience the ecstasy of the root beginnings. But the terror is that you'll never get back, or that you're just going to slowly spiral down some central sewer in the middle of this universe, and boom, that'll be the end of you. And at that point, you begin grabbing and struggling to pull out of this devices to recognize and float along with it. The second chakra, called the sexual chakra, is located at the root of the genitals. Now actually, complete sexual experience involves all of your centers and all of your consciousness. But the imagery of this center is dominated by the joyous, slippery union of male and female at all levels of evolutionary development. Now, I don't mean that you're fantasizing having a sexual affair with Marilyn Monroe. That's the most gamey aspect of the principle that's involved here. It means that your consciousness is hooked up to the basic male-female electrical process, which is expressed at every level of life in your body, because the consciousness of the sexual chakra is much broader than overt sex. Molecules, cells, germs, tissues, all higher forms sliding together in the polar embrace. There comes the awareness that the 2 billion year chain of life, of all life, is simply the endless dance of couples coupling in fierce ecstasy. The terror of the sexual chakra comes, as all terrors come, from the desperate attempt to hold on to the external symbolic ego. As you slip into moist, intertwined union, you discover that you are vulnerable and soft, and that you have given up your cherished individuality and all of your defenses. Your identity is merging in the union. You become aware of this incessant beat of all life in the universe, pulsing into every corner of your body. The ecstasy of this center is union of your flow and pulse in the river of all life. The harmony of your heartbeat with the pulse of all life. And this is a classic experience of unity which mystics have been writing about for thousands of years.
It's like dying and being reborn. To take one little piece out of one of my experiences, I could say I became the idea of a stained glass window. I entered a cavern of dripping jewels. I would say that where I found myself most would be in the most natural way. As a woman, as a girl, merging into a woman. By concentration, by breathing exercises, by various body postures. These all tend to take you out of the particular role or situation you were involved in and focus your consciousness inside. It relieves you of your personality or ego and gets you to a higher level of awareness.
Taking LSD is really a form of yoga, but there are many other forms of yoga. And the point, very briefly, of practicing any form of yoga is to try to maintain an expanded level of consciousness. That is, you take LSD, you go out, and you come back. And then what? And then the immediate next question is, can you maintain it? Can you maintain even a fraction of that expanded level of awareness for any length of time? And that's where the so-called methods of yoga come in.
Dr. Ralph Metzner, a psychopharmacologist and Timothy Leary's principal assistant, with his description of the LSD experience.
When you take LSD, everything falls apart. All learned structures, all thought patterns, all beliefs, opinions, emotional convictions, positive or negative, they all fall apart. How a person sees himself, what he thinks of himself in relation to the world, how he sees himself. Those are the ones that to which you cling most tenaciously, and those are the ones that go last. But essentially what happens when you take LSD, it all goes, it all breaks apart, and you're left with nothing. Then when you come back, what happens is that you go back to the same patterns that you left. But you then have the knowledge that something else is possible, and the possibility of perhaps changing.
Have I answered the question, who am I? Well, I confront it all the time. As I said earlier, we think of ourselves as members of a very traditional organization of men who have been asking the question, what's what, and who is man, and what is this energy process all about? I went into psychology 20 years ago, basically as a career. I was simple-minded enough to take seriously the mottos of psychology, that psychology is supposed to be finding out what goes on with the human being. And 5 years ago, by accident in Mexico, I took Mexican mushrooms, the so-called magic mushrooms of Mexico, and I learned more about my brain and its possibilities, and I learned more about psychology in the 5 hours after taking these mushrooms than I had in the preceding 15 years studying, doing research in psychology. And since that day, which is just exactly 5 years ago this week, I've done practically nothing except continue this exploration that was triggered off by this accidental experience in Mexico. I'm finding out what are the range and limits of consciousness and attempting to develop maps and languages for charting these incredible realms within our own skull. It's not just what's going on around you and inside of you, but also consciousness of where you came from and the long telephone wire of history, which goes back 2 billion years, which is buried somewhere inside your brain and mine. We are neurologically and biochemically in touch with thousands of generations that came before us. And the record of these previous evolutionary attempts are there. It's just that our mental, symbolic minds can't decode these messages. And men have been discovering this experience and developing methods to get high or to go out of their mind for thousands of years. And LSD is simply the modern yoga made possible by advances in science, which have produced these incredible chemicals which we call psychedelic drugs.
I met presidents and vice presidents of companies that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange at over $200 a share, who are personally involved in LSD. I met vice presidents of corporations that said that their advanced research budgets would be used to use LSD in the learning process to find out about how man learns if legislation was to change. I found musicians. I found artists.
The project is an art cultural center.
You made these sketches during the session, right?
Yes, I did.
How did it all happen?
Essentially, during the quiet morning of not thinking about the project, but thinking in reference to it, I took a trip through architectural history and visited and saw various cities and places. And at the end of the morning, prior to the work session, we all sat up and had lunch and talked a little. And I sat down to start work on the project without one thought that came from before.
These are the actual sketches?
Yes. These first three.
Mm-hmm.
This one is the overall plot. It's a 2-acre square plot with a court-type building, an inner theater, which is surrounded by groups of shops and artist studios and coffee house and so forth.
This blueprint came after, I guess.
Yes.
You've got to tell me about this trip through history.
I saw myself actually swinging through trees with a group of almost ape-like creatures, but they were human, and I was part of them. And then I got a flash into a cave where I saw the paintings on the walls and the clothing and non-clothing of the people, everything in absolute detail, technicolor, and I was there. I was participating. The next flash was a walk through an Incan city and seeing a huge temple and the court plaza of the city, and the people walking through the city, the little shop vendors. I would walk and look at the fruits and vegetables they were selling. I could see the costuming in absolute detail. I went from there into an ice cream parlor, and I was wearing a wildly striped blazer and looking at the various decorations and architecture in the building itself. And then I found myself in a modern city that was something that I had really never seen, but a very, very modern city that I was strolling through and looking at the magnificent, spectacular modern architecture. And shortly after that, I was sort of through with the trip and sat up and waited until the others were ready to start to work. And I was just anxious to go to work, but I didn't really know what I was going to do until after we'd broken for lunch.
That was here in this room?
Right here in this spot, as a matter of fact.
This chair?
No, I was lying on the floor, right here.
I see. I don't see it all. I see.
The patterns were generally this kind. And I could easily see that getting some kind of symmetry, I might stretch this out a little bit, perhaps a straighter line in here. And then I found that later on I could put it in 3 dimensions. Okay.
And then, like magic, you had a line of furniture. Can I see that again?
You see these handles all occur at the top of each drawer, and they're more or less an integral part of the drawer head.
Beautiful. Mr. Stolleroff, Professor Harmon, you're both members of the staff of the Institute for Psychedelic Research. The work you're doing may well become a felony under the law in this country. Are we on the edge or in the middle of a rather serious collision of social forces over this issue of psychedelic drugs?
Well, it's hard for me to believe, Tom, that our federal government is going to be so stupid as to make scientific research in these areas a felony. I think what is going to happen is that it's going to be very severely restricted, that only persons of proven responsibility are going to be allowed to carry it on. And as long as the black market problem remains a serious one, I think it's going to be very hard for new researchers to break into the field. But I think the real problem stems from the fact that there are rather wonderful gains and understanding to be made in these substances, and unfortunately the young people seem to have discovered this before our scientific authorities have.
Is there a way of getting to the kids, saying, what have you learned? What have your experiences been like?
Well, I'm sure there is. The problem is nobody's wanted to do it, and I don't think they've recognized the validity of some of the subjective experiences because they're not familiar with them themselves, and because there are a lot of reports from ununderstanding people that don't have these kinds of experiences. I think they're going to be forced to talk to the youngsters because I think that this problem is going to grow so, and there are going to be so many young people in this situation that sooner or later we will be forced to acknowledge that there's a real problem here, and we're going to have to find out why so many youngsters are taking it, why they consider it so valuable, why they continue to do it. And until we really understand from their viewpoint what they're gaining from these experiences, we'll never really understand how to cope with the problem.
Flashes are inside here, you get an insight and you know something, But you don't want to say it out loud because you're kind of afraid that it's not going to be really true and it'll spoil the whole thing for you, you know? But when somebody makes you say it, then, and it's true, then it just makes it more beautiful of a thing.
Do you want to go for the more beautiful and say it?
Who are you?
Just me?
Who are you?
What kind of a line do you want?
Don't answer. He won't answer me because you already know what the insight was.
No,
See,
I don't.
yes, you do. He won't answer me. He wants me to say it, damn it.
Now go.
No,
Come on, say it.
because these guys aren't just doing a regular film. They're doing it for you because it's your idea.
So?
Because you're somebody that knows about stuff like this. And you can sit down and talk to me about it, and that's beautiful. I'm glad that you're doing it. Just hope you get the right stuff out of it for people.
But what's the right stuff?
Well, not that. Well, how many times have you taken it, and kind of, but the feelings. No, I don't want to hear about, that makes it sound very clinical, like as though, well, if you take it this many times and you flipped out, and you can take it, It's not that way at all. You can take it once and never have to take it again. But it's not, you already know, so you can, it's nice to go back up there. Yeah, but you never have to take it again. One time is all you need with the right person, or the right people in the right place.
Seen any monsters lately?
Oh, not me. I'm a happy person. See, I can't, it doesn't hurt me. Can't have any monsters.
Medical doctors say you're liable to go psychotic.
I don't know what psychotic means, really, clinically. I don't know. Nervous? Or introverted, or what does it mean?
Off your head.
Oh, really?